Welcome to Lyme Time. I'm Allie from the Tick Chicks. We are all more than Lyme disease and chronic illness, and together we stand with you to overcome and rise. I'll bring you closer to the experts in cutting-edge treatments and even a few unexpected ways of healing. I'll ask the questions you want answers to regarding Lyme disease and successful ways of getting you closer to 100%. We are in this together and will not be defined by Lyme. So today on Lyme Time, I'm very excited to be speaking with Brad Pitzele. And I think he has a lot of interesting things to say about exercise with oxygen therapy. We'll call it Ewot for now, but I'm so excited to dive in with him today. And let me just tell you a little bit about Brad. After a lifetime of strange medical conditions, Brad was diagnosed with autoimmune arthritis in 2010. Brad began traditional treatments until he was diagnosed with malignant melanoma in 2014. Realizing that the treatments had a higher risk of cancer, Brad was determined to find a better way, as all great leaders are. On his healing journey, he discovered he had Lyme disease and a co-infection called Bartonella. Brad's health continued to decline to the point where he could barely walk. He had severe brain fog and chronic fatigue issues. In 2016, his doctor recommended he either try hyperbaric oxygen therapy or exercise with oxygen therapy, also known as Ewot. After researching, Brad decided to try Ewot, but because he did not have confidence in what was being sold on the marketplace at the time, he decided to build his own. A year later, showing great improvements in health, his doctor asked him if he would start making Ewot systems for his patients. And 1,000 Roads was born with the mission of bringing down the price of Ewot so that more people could benefit from it. 1,000 Roads, which is his company, seeks to provide affordable, high-quality Ewot systems to people with chronic health challenges. Their goal is to spread both awareness and availability of Ewot systems so that many more people can experience the powerful healing of Ewot. Welcome to Lyme Time, Brad.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, Ellie.
Of course, I'm very excited to learn more about this powerful therapy for Lyme disease, and I'm sure other chronic illness. And before we get into that, can you just talk to us a little bit about? I mean, it takes one to know one is basically the idea here. You know, I find that a lot of Lyme treatments are best described by people who have walked in our shoes and have been diagnosed with Lyme disease and can tell us a little bit about, their personal experience, which everybody can relate to. So tell us a little bit about your own chronic illness journey.
Yeah, actually, the earliest symptoms I have of Lyme disease go back to about second grade. I started to develop psoriasis, a skin condition, autoimmune. And about a year and a half earlier, we had taken in a feral cat, and I suspect that might be the genesis of it. And then, but it was mild. I didn't really think much of it. I went to the dermatologist. We tried normal treatments. And it kind of wasn't like a major thing in my life. But then I had strange symptoms throughout my life. Different things would come and go. I would see the doctor sometimes, and they would give it a name. But there usually is nothing you could do. And then it would just kind of go away and maybe pop its head up later. As you mentioned in my biography, it really didn't get serious until about 2010 when I started to develop autoimmune arthritis. At the time, they diagnosed it as psoriatic arthritis. And I was overworking myself. I was working on repairing a short sale house to get it ready for my family. Had a full-time job, so I was kind of burning the candle at both ends, and it just started to catch up on me. And yeah, I started all the traditional therapies, and they would help for 6 months. They were immune suppressants. And 6 months later, I'd be worse off, and the doctor would say, let's double your dose. And I got another 6 months. At the end of that, I'd take another step into the cellar. And like I said, it didn't really stop until I actually got what I'll call the gift of cancer, as strange as that sounds. But I went back to my rheumatologist and I said, look, if I don't take these medicines, I'm going to die of this autoimmune disease and it's going to be disabling. But if I take it, I'm probably going to die of cancer. And I had had other precancerous conditions prior to that. And so I was really concerned. And he kind of said, well, we'll just try another brand of the same thing. And I was like, geez, that's not really comforting. And that's what kind of pushed me off the traditional path to look for other alternatives. And so spent a lot of time looking, trying all sorts of things. I didn't know I had Lyme. I didn't get diagnosed till about 2016 or 17. The doctor said, "Hey, we've tried all these things." And it was an alternate health doctor. And he's like, nothing's really working. He's like, I want to do a Lyme test on you. It's like $500. It was DNA connections. And I just remember thinking to myself, I didn't get a tick bite. I didn't have a bullseye rash. This isn't me. I don't have it, but like, I'm going to spend the $500 to get the doctor's mind off it so we can go find the real thing. And of course, it came back and I had Lyme and Bartonella. And so I remember I didn't even believe it. I went back to him and go, like, what's the chances this is a false positive? And he's like, well, you've got the DNA of the bacteria in your urine. What do you think? And I'm like, oh, that's what that means. Okay, then I guess I have it. So that was kind of helpful because now I had a name and I started to do a ton of research, I read all the Buhner books multiple times, many other books, studied a ton of things, research on Lyme, etc. I was very motivated to get better because at that point I was diagnosed, as you mentioned, the bio, my Bartonella foot pain was so severe that I could barely walk. My brain fog, my nerve pain, my stiff muscles, my arthritis, all of these symptoms, I was barely functioning and I was like faking it at work to make it through the day. And I know so many of your listeners know about this, or you're just faking it and hide if you can. You're lucky like me and you can hide in an office and hope they don't call you into a meeting. And then you're spending all evening and weekends sleeping just so you can fake it, sort of thing. And then the doctor recommended I try either hyperbaric or exercise with oxygen therapy. And I'd never heard of exercise with oxygen therapy. So I'm like, I'm going to do hyperbaric. I've heard of that. And I looked into it and it was going to be like 50 or 75,000 for the protocol he recommended dollars, 50 or $75,000. And it involved spending 90 minutes in a tube in a doctor's office every day, 7 days a week. And, plus you got to get to and from the doctor's office. And like I just knew I couldn't keep my job that way. I was already fighting for it. This is before COVID, so there was no work from home flexibility. It's like I needed to be in the office and they just weren't going to see me missing 2 and 3 hours a day every day for weeks on end. So that wasn't realistic financially, I felt. I mean, because I didn't have confidence. I'd tried so many things that didn't work. Why was I going to spend 75 grand on a moonshot, so to speak? And then I looked into Ewot, and at the time, there were a handful of providers, and they were probably the systems would cost between $10,000 and $25,000 each. Um, and when I went to their websites, they were filled with a lot of marketing hyperbole. And, I just didn't have a good feeling. I was like, I don't feel good spending that kind of money. There's no science here. It just feels like it felt like a sales pitch without a lot of content behind it. So I made my own just out of kind of desperation. And, I have an engineering degree, so I kind of put that to work and designed and built my own. And um, as you mentioned the bio, about a year later, when I went to the doctor, he's like, wow, you're looking much better. And he's like, and he asked me, where'd you buy it from? So I can tell my patients about it. And I said, I didn't buy it. I just made it, doc. And he looked at me like I had a horn grown out of my head. He's like, what? He knows that. And he goes, and then he paused for a second. He goes, like, would you consider making them for my patients? And I remember at the time I was like, I was still in recovery mode. I was like, I don't know, doc. I kind of got here overworking myself. Let me think about it. I don't want to take on too much in my healing journey. But about a year later, I was like, you know what? Yeah, I think we can do this. And I think there's a space for someone to bring some science and, help people understand how this works and make it more affordable so people can actually do it. Because we all know whatever protocol is working for you, the foundation of it is consistency over time. And if you can do it in your own home, then you can be consistent over time. And it's really powerful because Ewot, if I can just describe it shortly for people who don't
Yes,
understand
yes. I'd love
it.
to understand the science between us behind it.
So what is Ewot really? It's really simple. All you're doing is doing a 15-minute cardiovascular exercise workout while you're breathing oxygen. And what that means is there's a mask on your face. And when you breathe in that mask, you're breathing in 93% pure oxygen versus the 21% you breathe in normally in the air. And so um, it's pretty simple to do, and it only takes 15 minutes. And I always say the hardest part about Lyme disease is you're trying all these treatments, and each one of them has its own ceremony. If you're doing herbs or supplements, you got to count the pills every night. Remember to take them. If you're doing a sauna, there's 30 minutes in the sauna, and then the Epsom salt bath, or whatever the thing is. And none of them are super time absorbing, but like you put it all together, and sometimes you're like 4 hours of stuff every day, and you're like, yeah, by the end of the day, I have 15 minutes of feeling good before I go to bed, and then I got to start over. Like, what's the point? And so Ewot's really powerful because it does so many positive things for you, and you can do them all in 15 minutes. Now, before I get into the science, what I will say, and this is part of the science, is the first thing Ewot does for everyone who uses it is it improves your athletic performance. And why that's important is not because people with Lyme disease want to go out and finish a marathon. It's important because oftentimes when you're sick with Lyme disease, the thought of doing exercise seems pretty daunting with the fatigue. But what people find is when you start doing Ewot, you almost immediately notice that the exercise feels easier. And like as an example, I'd say like if you're on an exercise bike or a treadmill and you're at a level 4 resistance or whatever speed or whatever it is, you're going to put that mask on your face, and immediately to feel like you're working as hard, you need to put it up to 5 or 6 to have the same perceived effort. So what that means is for a lot of folks who have a hard time generally exercising, this is more attainable because of that oxygen.
Okay.
Um,
I do want to backtrack a little bit and say,
yep.
um, with regard to the science, Lyme disease, and specifically Lyme disease, and
Yes.
specifically, you have Bartonella, and I assume you have Borrelia uh,
Hmm.
in the
Yes.
Lyme. Okay, so how did you equate the oxygen therapy with how on the earth does that help these strains of bacteria?
That's a really good question. And it's multimodal, is what I'll tell you. It helps in many different ways. So the first thing that every one of us who's ever had Lyme disease have is we have inflammation. Really, inflammation is at the root of just about every chronic illness you can think of. Um, and the inflammation causes all sorts of damage in our bodies, but it's also what causes the symptoms, the pain and arthritis or nerve pain or stiffness and brain fog. All these things are caused by inflammation. So oxygen is a very powerful anti-inflammatory. And on our website, we have a research page, and on there's one of my favorite pieces of research is the medical term for having low oxygen in a part of your body is called hypoxia. That's what their fancy term for low oxygen. And the research says anywhere in your body you have inflammation, that part of your body is also low in oxygen. It has hypoxia. But the flip is also true. Anywhere in your body that's starved of oxygen, it has inflammation. You cannot have one without the other. They're the two sides of the same coin. And so when we're able to flood the body with oxygen, we're able to turn off that spigot of inflammation. That's important, obviously, to ameliorate our symptoms and make us feel better. But it's also important because inflammation is a strategy that these very intelligent infectious agents like Lyme and Bartonella and so many others use to gain access to more real estate in our body. They create an inflammatory response that also weakens our immune system it damages cells, and then they're able to gain access to those cells and make those cells their new host. And then from there, they continue and so on and so forth. So when we're able to tamp down that inflammation, we're able to turn off that key factor that allows them to take more real estate and effectively grow in our body. So that's the very first thing it does. Um, the next thing I'd say it does is our body has two ways of making energy. The first way is what's called aerobic respiration. We breathe in oxygen, it's delivered through our blood to our cells. Our cells use that oxygen to produce a chemical called APT, which is created in our cells inside of our mitochondria. And that is the basic energy source on which we run for everything we do. But our body is smart and it has a backup. If it's starved of oxygen, it can switch to anaerobic respiration, whereby it burns glucose to create energy in the absence of oxygen. Now, the downside to that is twofold. One is when you have anaerobic respiration, it creates lactic acid and all of these metabolic wastes. But the other problem is it's a lower energy state for the cells. And so the cells are, because they're in a lower energy state, they turn off non-essential functions. And one of the first non-essential functions they stop doing is they stop taking the trash out. So what I mean by that is all of this metabolic waste that they're creating, they just let it build up inside the cell wall. And so our cells become filled with metabolic waste. They're not operating as efficiently. They're not able to do whatever their function is. If it's in the liver, they're not filtering as cool. If it's in a blood cell, it's not able to do what a blood cell. The immune cells, same thing, everywhere. So when we're able to bring in oxygen, there's parts of our body that have hypoxia, that have low oxygen, and they're being starved. That's not only is that creating inflammation, it's making those cells less efficient. And we're able to reintroduce oxygen and send them from anaerobic back to aerobic, where they're at a higher energy state. So every one of our cells now is able to operate more optimally. And that affects us in a variety of ways. One, obviously, we've all dealt with Lyme fatigue. That's a killer for all of us. Obviously, when you're bringing in that oxygen, you'll feel a boost in energy. It's kind of like if you've ever done an oxygen bar. Two of the things people notice from an oxygen bar is more energy and a clearer head, right? You get that, but at a much higher level than an oxygen bar.
Wow, I cannot even imagine. Because every time I go to the mountains, I do an oxygen bar treatment, and that
Yep.
actually helps me if I'm just there 5 or 6 days. It really helps me get through the whole week, and I feel like a normal person as opposed to somebody who's huffing and puffing every time they go up the stairs and all
Right.
that. So I imagine it's just sort of like a more intensified experience.
Absolutely. So right now, you and I, when we're sitting here in our seat, we're breathing maybe around 3 liters of air a minute. And when you're exercising, and that air is about 1/5, let's say, oxygen. So, 0.6 liters of oxygen in a minute. When you're doing exercise with oxygen therapy, you can easily bring in 50 or 60 liters of pure oxygen every minute. So it's a massive amount. So you can imagine how that amplifies from an oxygen bar to Ewot. But I mentioned the oxygen bar because many of us have experienced that, so that helps you understand that. Now, one of the things it helps improve, one of the most important things it helps improve is it helps improve our immune system. Our immune system now is being fully energized. We're turning off the inflammation that's wasting a lot of its energy, basically damaging the self on for the benefit of the Lyme, the Bartonella, the Babesia, whatever it is. And so it's no longer wasting energy and cells on fighting and damaging the body with inflammation, and it's got more energy to fight the Lyme. And so it becomes a more competent immune system, which is super important in Lyme disease. The next one for Lyme specifically, Lyme can't live in a high oxygen environment. It needs low oxygen to survive. So it's anti-Borrelia at a very fundamental level. And as a matter of fact, for people who are very sick with Lyme disease, one of the watchouts I have for them is always start slow and build up to see if you're going to have a Herxenheimer or a die-off reaction. Some folks do, some folks don't. And that's just one thing we want to be careful with because it can cause die-off or a detox reaction, both, and which are I describe as a little different. Die-off meaning we're killing the Lyme. The detox reaction occurs because, as I mentioned, this is multimodal. It's very detoxifying. Now, something that rarely gets talked about in the Lyme community or in the detox conversations at all is that 70% of our body's ability to detox actually comes from our breath. So people often don't talk or think about that, but oxygen detoxifies us in a variety of ways. One, we mentioned that when our cells go anaerobic, they're building up all of this metabolic waste and other waste products and other toxins are building up inside the cell wall. When we re-establish normal oxygen, the body now has the energy to clean out the cells and detox. So that also is another source why I say start slow because you can have a detoxification reaction from that. The other way it detoxifies is the way our body breaks down complex molecules and chemicals to get them out of our through our elimination organs is through a process called oxidization. Oxygen is very powerful at breaking down chemicals. It's the reason why you need oxygen for fire. It's the reason why you need oxygen to create APT through aerobic respiration is this oxidization reaction. But oxidization also breaks these chemicals down so our kidneys and our liver and the rest of our elimination organs can get them out of our body. So it's very detoxifying in that way as well. Um, and so the great thing about it is, to me, in 15 minutes a day, you can get in a detox. You can fight back the infection. You can tamp down the inflammation. So you're really hitting all of these key components of helping yourself heal. And because it's multimodal, it's something that's really possible to do on an ongoing basis. And people see really great results if you do it consistently over time.
It just sounds amazing. And, a couple things that sort of caught my attention. Number one, uh, this Lyme bacteria, some tick-borne illness, is not able to live in a high oxygen environment. And I think that's a huge takeaway. So for people with acute Lyme, people that just got it, I would think it would be beneficial. Whereas I think some treatments you have to try to kind of hold off for Lyme
Mhm.
patients until their body is ready to accept this. But this is basically getting putting the cart before the horse and getting your body fixed first in order to handle the Lyme infection. But also, it speaks to me for all types of chronic illness because the reason why there's such a controversy, which, with certain organizations and our government being able to recognize chronic Lyme is because they are saying that infection doesn't last. But people are obviously suffering for years and years. And basically, what that is that it's that chronic inflammatory response that is the aftermath of the infection. And although a lot of doctors out there wouldn't say it's Lyme disease, what it is a systemic breakdown of your entire system for years and years. I mean, it can last. I've had people talk to me that have had it for 30 years.
Yep.
And so what you're doing is breaking the cycle of chronic. And talk to me, but before we get into the actual minutia of the treatment, talk to me about other chronic conditions that it can stave off.
Yeah, we're helping people with so many chronic conditions, and that is actually one of the most rewarding things I have so much gratitude for. Oxygen is very anti-cancerous. There's a ton of research out there that'll show you oxygen also or cancer can't live in a high oxygen environment, and the flip is true. Any cell that you cut the oxygen off of can be made to be cancerous, and this is research going back to the 1920s. Even people doing whether they're doing traditional therapies or alternate therapies, they're using it. They've shown that the success rate of traditional therapies is based on how much oxygen is in the tumor. So, and people use it to help with the traditional therapies plus all the detoxification of those therapies. They use it as an alternate therapy on itself or with other alternate cancer therapies. Folks are using it for Alzheimer's. There's a Dr. Dale Bredesen out there who's got this recode protocol, which is reversing cognitive decline. And in it, he's starting to recommend Ewot for that as well. Um, Very well known for that. For Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, of course, these are, sometimes these overlap greatly with Lyme disease, all sorts of autoimmune conditions, chronic fatigue syndrome, and even people like CTE or strokes or other brain traumas are using it to heal their brain traumas as well. We've seen some tremendous results there as well. So really, I would say there's probably not any adult in the United States who's healthy enough to exercise who couldn't benefit from Ewok. It's anti-aging. So we have a lot of biohackers and folks doing it just for its anti-aging benefits. So
I definitely hear Joe Rogan speaking a little bit more about oxygen therapy these days. So that's exciting too for you. Uh, you know, but what I like about it is because it's great for all kinds of different chronic illness, you can justify the cost of it, bringing it into your home because other members of your family can be benefiting from it, even if they don't have Lyme disease. And that's what I love about it so much. It's sort of like the infrared sauna. It's just helping. It can help every member of your family. So let's take me to the space where I'm coming to you for a treatment or a session.
mhm.
Or maybe even I just order it through the mail and it comes to my house. I know we need to start with baby steps, but what does it look like to a patient, the treatment process?
Yep. So first I'll describe the equipment and then I'll describe how you use it. So as I mentioned before, when you exercise, you can easily use 50 or 60 liters of oxygen in a minute. And in a 15-minute session, you can bring in as much oxygen as if you were in a hard shell hyperbaric chamber in a doctor's office in 90 minutes, which is roughly the equivalent of the same amount of oxygen you and I take in like 13 or 14 hours. So it's a massive amount of oxygen in a very short period of time. In order to do this, we sell a piece of equipment that basically distills near pure oxygen out of the air. So it's a one-time purchase. All you're doing is putting electricity into this machine. It's taking 21% oxygen on the intake and it's spitting out 93% oxygen on the other side. Now, the problem with it is we sell two different models, one that produces 5 liters of oxygen a minute, and the other one that produces 10 liters of oxygen per minute. So not enough to exercise. So what we do is we create a buffer between you and that machine. We have this large reservoir. It's about 6 feet wide and about 5.5 feet tall. It can hold 1,000 liters. So if you think about a 2 liter bottle of soda, multiply that by 50, 1,000 liters of oxygen. And so we fill that reservoir with 1,000 liters of oxygen. So if you had our 10-liter model, our more powerful model, it takes about 90 minutes to fill that reservoir. If you had our smaller model, it takes about 3 hours to fill that reservoir. And then that reservoir has a hose coming off it that you plug into a mask and you fit this exercise mask on you. And it has a special valve on it. And so it's a two-way valve. So every time you breathe in, a valve opens to allow the pure oxygen out of that reservoir. And when you breathe out, that valve shuts so your exhale gases won't go back into the reservoir. And another valve opens so you're breathing your exhale gases out into the room. So every breath continuously is 93% oxygen. Um, and so what does a session look like is you fill the reservoir, you put the mask on when you're ready to go, and you get on your preferred piece of cardio equipment. Some people use exercise bikes, ellipticals, rowing machines. We have people using treadmills. We have people using rebounders. And some folks start out and they're not, healthy enough to get an intense workout, let's say. So they may start out with a walk on the treadmill and slowly build up over time, or they might start out on a vibration plate or a rebounder until they're feeling better and they can do more, or one of those $40 or $50 pedal bikes you can put at the end of a chair and kind of pedal it gently while they're doing it. So we have folks doing that. And I always say my ethos on this is perfection is the enemy of progress. So you start where you are today and you just get going, and over time your endurance will improve with this and you'll be able to do more, and it'll just be natural. You won't be like straining to get to more. You'll just be like, oh, this is I need to do more to feel like I'm doing the same amount of work. Um, and so you put the mask on, you do 15 minutes of exercise, that's all you need, and while breathing through the mask, and then you're done. And as far as frequency, for most folks, I think a sweet spot is around 3 to 5 times a week. Um, I think really ideally, like eventually working up to five, but again, you know, progress versus perfection, and you'll see great results even if you're only able to do it once a week, sort of thing. So, um, and basically, the reason why we don't say 7 days a week is simply because there's exercise involved. Let your body rest and recover, but you really can't overdo it. If you were, there's actually alternate cancer centers that are recommending their patients do it like 3 times a day. And I think that's overkill, quite frankly, but there's no harm in doing it. So, yeah, it's as simple as that.
Okay, and so the reservoir that you're talking about, when you say it takes about an hour and a half to fill up,
Yep.
do you just push a button and then it takes from the oxygen in the air, and then an hour and a half later you come back? You don't have to actually be filling it from a company or anything. You're just drawing from good old
That's
air.
that's right. And that's another great thing about Ewot. We all know we've all taken our fistful of pills every morning, and it's $20 for this bottle and $40 for that one. And it adds up over time. This is a one-time expense. You buy it, and the only thing you're paying for really ongoing is electricity, which isn't much. And maybe after a year and a half or 2 years, you may come back and say, my mask is a little bit dirty. Can I get a new one? And they're not that much either. So.
And you recommend, like, if two or more people in the household were getting doing the therapy, do you recommend getting a couple of masks, or can they just be used with each other?
That's That's a great question. I generally recommend if there's multiple people in the house, I have two recommendations. One, you would want our 10 liter per minute system because the recovery time between when the first person gets done and then it's ready for the next person is shorter, which scheduling always becomes an issue, right? We all have work and have to get the kid, whatever it is. And so that gives you greater flexibility. And I recommend everyone get their own mask. Now, you can share a mask, but the reason why I recommend it, our masks are pretty cool because they have this 5-way Velcro strap to like fit it to your face exactly. And once you got the fit right, you can clip and unclip it so that you never have to fiddle with that Velcro again if it's your own mask. If not, it's kind of like, each time you're trying to get it right, and I would say that's just another point of friction, and that's going to cause the 15 minutes to be 18 minutes, and that on that day you just might not have it, sort of thing. So if
Sure.
there's just you can just jump on and do it, that just makes things better.
That makes a lot of sense. So, we are on the Lyme Time podcast discussing exercise with the oxygen therapy with Brad Pitzele. And I wanted to talk about, of course, everybody's question. What is the cost of this? And how do I get it? And all of those great details.
Yep. So I think I told you about some of the prices of the competitors when we came out, and our goal was to bring the price down. We have two models. Kind of our standard model is the 10 liter per minute system. That goes for $2,299. And then we have an economy model, which is 5 liters per minute. And that one goes for $1,699. So something that's affordable for most folks, again, being a one-time purchase. How do you get it? We sell through e-commerce. Our website is 1000roads.com, ONETHOUSANDROADS.com. And we have it there. We also have a blog with a lot of information. We have research, a lot of information. And the other thing we do on our website that's unique in the space is we're the first folks to put out reviews, let our customers put their reviews on our website, because I understand, I have a lot of empathy for someone who has chronic illness and someone's asking you to spend a lot of your money and you're trying to make buying decisions. And this is something most folks haven't heard of. So they like is this real or is this voodoo science? You want to hear from other people, not from the company themselves. So we do try to, and we encourage those reviews. So that's a great place for people to learn more about how other customers are feeling about the product.
Is a reservoir, what is it made out of? Is it plastic? Does it need to be close by where you're exercising, or
It's a
can
great
it be in
question.
a garage or something?
Our reservoirs are made out of food grade LDPE. So it's the same material that's in your bread bags or in your condiment bottles, etc. So it's a material that's made to be in contact with things we consume. Um, it's it has a 10-foot hose, so you do want to be close to the machine. So you've got 10 feet between that reservoir and your mask. However, we also sell hose extensions where you can extend that up to 20 feet and give you a little bit more flexibility if your room arrangement requires a little bit more room.
Okay, perfect. Um, I think that's easy enough. Obviously, you would just get this thing in the mail.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, so just shipped right out to you, everybody out there. And I mean, I think I can speak to a lot of people that are listening to this from the comfort of their bed, because as you said, I also have Bartonella as well, and I couldn't walk, much less even think about exercising. And so, I think it's important that you did say, if you're starting out, just hopefully even doing simple stretching or sit-ups, or, anything that you can do. It may
That's
not,
right.
it may not look like exercise to a lot of different people, but I guess the idea is that you just want to get your heart rate up for 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's right. And so we even have folks who are doing it inside an infrared sauna. They're in one of those sauna things and they got the mask on to start out because of that. Now, I always tell my personal story. I forgot this part until I found this picture a couple of years ago, but my foot pain was so bad and I was in such bad shape. I found this picture. I had this elliptical in my garage I was using when I started doing Ewot. And I don't know if you know those Neo pads you use to work in the garden. They're about an inch thick of foam. I'd
Yes.
taken two of those and put them on the pedals of the elliptical machine because that was the only way I could tolerate doing it. So you start where you can. You're not gonna do 15 minutes of wind sprints 5 days a week on your first time. And to be honest, you never need to get up to wind sprints. You really the ideal plateau for most folks is about 70 or 80% of their theoretical max heart rate, which is kind of like equivalent to a good jog, but not like a sprint or anything like that. Just like a typical cardio session. And
Yeah.
if it and like you said, it's a hard road, but you just start out one step at a time and you start walking yourself out of the hole you're in.
Literally walking yourself out of it. And I can
Yep.
relate to all. I stepped there. There used to be something on the market. I'm sure it still is. These patches. They were prescription, but they were naproxen patches that you put on your lower back for back pain. And I was putting them all over my feet and sticking them to my feet just to be able to like walk around and feel like I was a normal human being. So that Bartonella foot pain is real. And
Yeah.
I wish I would have known about this treatment therapy back in the day for me. I think there's a couple of things worth noting. Number one, you spoke a little bit about hiding your pain, and I think this really rings true for a lot of men with Lyme disease, because they are raised to be providers, strong, have all the answers, not complain. I think a lot of men go unrecognized in this particular uh, community. And so, I thank you for bringing it, normalizing it, and just saying, like, yeah, I mean, all of us can relate to going to work and just barely being able to survive, but you have to bring in the paycheck and you have to go to work. So, this having something like this at the end of the day from the comfort of your home, I think will be able to speak to a lot of people out there. The second thing I want to say is I love the fact that it takes a person with an engineering degree to sort of reimagine something that would have cost the typical patient 50,000 plus to saying, hey, I think I can do that better for my community. I think I can have this be in the comfort of everybody's home. There's no reason why it can't be. And I think with this new transition of like of even government exploring the ideas of alternative therapies and at least opening some eyes to this is hugely important. So, folks out there, you can learn more, and you can actually get one of these devices at 1000roads.com. And just before I get off this recording with you, Brad, I want to know, in your own words, just sort of, patient to patient, what words of advice or support you can offer to those people listening.
Well, I think the first thing is having hope. Hope is really where it all stems from. We all have been in that dark, dark place. I know I felt my light dimming and not knowing if I'd ever get better and just thinking I was going down. And there's a huge spiritual component to healing yourself. And I think having a ray of hope is super important for all of us and maintaining a positive outlook. There was a point in time when I was sick that I would have a dialogue with my disease, and I would just say, like, look, there's no safe harbor for you here. It's time for you to leave. I won't stop. I just had that conversation because I knew it was having a conversation with me by modulating my immune system and telling me what to eat, what not to eat. And so I kind of started that. But I think number one is hope. I think number two, having gratitude, because I think that also is a positive feedback loop that helps set your body more at ease and really helps fight the natural fight or flight mode that the very smart infections try to put us in.
Yeah, I mean, very well said. On that note, are there things that you recommend watching? I mean, we all, is there anything that would basically improve the Ewot that we can, help support this therapy? In other words, can anybody do it at any time, or is it better with people really having a clean diet or taking a binder, or is there anything supplementary that we would want to do?
Actually, there's not a whole lot you necessarily need to do supplementary. Um, there were some folks in the EWOT space who were really big at saying you should take niacin because it could cause a flush, and they felt like the oxygen could get deeper that way. But quite frankly, when you start to exercise, your body naturally recognizes it's going into oxygen deprivation. It does not have enough oxygen to keep up that level of activity. And our body is so smart, it adapts. And that's why we start breathing more deeply and more heavy, and our heart starts beating faster. And we have this vasodilation. So we're really just kind of, taking advantage of all those physiological changes and driving the oxygen in. The thing I would say is, it's really good at helping people detox and recover. So if you've tried some other therapy and you had a real strong die-off reaction or a detox reaction, I've found it was incredibly helpful for me. There was a couple times I overdid it and I immediately knew it. I had a massive headache and I knew I was going to be in bed for 3 days. And I did EWOT, and like when I got off, the headache was not 100% gone, but it was like that little 10-15%. I was like, okay, this is going to be annoyance for the rest of the day. Well, that was pretty cool. So but I don't think you necessarily need to pair it with anything, but likely it pairs well with just about anything.
That sounds great. Brad, thank you so much for enlightening all of us. And I'm sure many people will be running to your website to learn more about it and just see if it's going to be something that rings true to them for Lyme and chronic illness. Thank you so much for your time today, and I appreciate you coming on Lyme Time.
Thank you so much, Alan. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Lyme Time podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe on your favorite platform to be notified of new episodes. Remember, this is not intended to be medical advice. Take your findings to your provider to see if something is right for you. No two bodies heal the same, and your doctor knows you and your labs best. You can find out more about the Tick Chicks at thetickchicks.com, and if you subscribe there, you'll be notified of upcoming events like the in-person Losing Lyme retreat that I host. I also have shopping pages dedicated to helping your at-home symptom relief, as well as a private support group. Join the Tick Chicks tribe on Instagram, YouTube, Meta, TikTok, Pinterest, and X. You are not alone.